Hello and welcome to the Klassiki podcast. I'm your host, Sam Goff. Klassiki is your window into the world of Eastern European film. Subscribers gain access to our library of classic and contemporary titles, as well as filmmaker interviews, video introductions, program notes, and much more. You can sign up for a free trial today at klassiki.online. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice, and remember you can always get in touch with us at podcast@klassiki.online. It's been a while since we opened up the Kino Club, our watch-along exploration of Klassiki's ever-broadening catalogue. So we're putting that right this week on the show with a brand new guest, Savina Petkova, critic, programmer, teacher, and all-round font of film wisdom. As always, I asked Savina to pick a film from our library that she hadn't seen before, to watch it, and then jump on a call with me to discuss. Her pick was Getting to Know the Big Wide World, the 1978 construction site romance by the inimitable Kira Muratova. The film gave Savina and I the chance to wax lyrical about Muratova's unique approach to human relationships, the proletarian politics of the love triangle, and the beauty of a good mud-soaked building site. Hopefully you'll feel inspired to check out the film and to start exploring our library for yourselves. So follow the links in the show description to watch along with us on Klassiki. You'll also find some more Muratova goodness and links to some of Savina's work. Savina, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Kino Club. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
The pleasure's all ours. I mean, I've been meaning to get you on for a while because I'd love to share the takes and the wisdom, the peck of a blend of takes and wisdom with our audience. And when you plumped for Kira Muratova's Getting to Know the Big Wide World, I was absolutely delighted. This is, for me, as good as it gets. I don't know yet what your reaction to the film is, so maybe we can have an argument, or maybe you'll agree and we can just wax lyrical for half an hour. We'll see.
It is quite funny though, yeah, to think about the discussions of a film that both sides quite like. Yeah, it's probably gonna be like that.
Well, hopefully not too boring or monotonous, but
No, absolutely not.
yeah, I'll just start with the question I always start, which is why this film? Why did you pick this film out of our catalogue? And yeah, like, what's your relationship with Kira Muratova? What's your history with Kira?
So I was really over the moon when you suggested that I take part in the Kino Club and look through the catalog because there were so many titles that I really wanted to see. And the work of Kira Muratova was definitely up there because up until recently, I actually hadn't seen anything. I think I've been savoring my first encounters with her for a long time for no particular reason, but I felt like I'm gonna gel with that anyway, so there's no point in rushing. So when I suggested this film, I saw it as a way to get into her work as like a prompt. So I watched Brief Encounters for the first time, and that was fabulous. Oh my God, it
What
was
a
so
film.
good. What a film, honestly. And then I watched Getting to Know the Big Wide World. And they're such a good double bill, I have to say. In a way, I didn't read anything about the film before I watched it. I only read around it afterwards. But I was really surprised by how beautifully these two fit and how complementary they can be. Yeah, I'm a fan. I didn't have a particular history with Kira Muratova until now, with just the blind faith that I will really like her work, and voila, I do. But what attracted me to this film in particular was its plot, the way that the synopsis is set out as love triangle unfolding at a construction site. I was like, this is great. What could it be? I can't predict where this film could go. And yeah, I have a soft spot for how do I say it? Erotic Arithmetics? No. I don't know. The mathematics of coupledom
The
or things like that.
geometry,
And
maybe.
yeah, I guess so because the metaphor is a triangle, right? But at the bottom line is always an arithmetical task. You know, one plus one plus one, two plus one. It changes the whole dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty excited to talk to you about that film in particular.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of these kind of episodes, I always feel like you should give a brief plot synopsis, but like with Muratova, especially this film, it's not particularly important. It's not really a question of plot, like you say. It's almost like a mathematical problem posed that then is kind of worked
Mm.
out through these Muratovian. I'm trying to work out what the adjective is through these vignettes. But like the premise is a woman and two men, Luba, Misha, and Kolya, who are all working on this very muddy construction site somewhere in provincial Russia. And the Luba choosing between these two guys. Basically, I mean that's the long and short of it. And yeah, like you say, the love triangle thing is there in Brief Encounters. I'm guessing maybe that's what you mean when you say it paired well with Brief Encounters,
Mm.
Muratova's debut film that you watched beforehand, which is also about a love triangle. In that case, it's like a love triangle that no one's quite aware of.
The
Um,
best kind.
yeah, less tension, less outright tension. Whereas in this one, it's very out in the open. You said that you have a soft spot for the love triangle. You have a soft spot for the construction site as well. Maybe I mean, like, what do you make of the setting of this drama?
Yeah, so from what I gather, it's a script that was proposed to Muratova to work with Len Film Studio, and the script itself seems to be quite straightforwardly socialist realism, very workers unite with a brief love story in between. And because she said yes to adapting it and changing it a lot, apparently, to the point where the author didn't have any choice but to agree to the proposed script, is a pretty good move, I think, because it gives us the setting of a story that could be watched by viewers outside of the Eastern Bloc and feel its grittiness and also a captivating slice of life in a way. I mean, Muratova's idea of reality is, of course, a little bit more fractured and a little bit more, I don't know, nostalgic, maybe magical, elevated in some way, emotional, it's full of feeling. The daily life is enchanting as it is saddening in her films. That's the impression that I get,
Mm,
especially in this one. But at the same time, setting the film at a construction site of a future factory that is being built. So in a way, it's not the archetype of a story, but it's the arc something of the proletariat, you know, where the
yeah,
rules are still not set in stone. It's the productivity is there, but the productivity is put in to make productivity the center of people's lives, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
It's a different kind of productivity, and we can see by the characters having a lot of chats and also a lot of fun at the same time with a construction site, but without taking it to a limit that is borderline caricature. In a way, I think this is the thing that I was taken by surprise with the fact that these people, they're constantly the the trio, protagonist trio, but also the adjacent characters are having fun exploring different ways of communicating, and they're
right, yeah,
also working, but they're taking snipes at each other. There's a dynamic in the way that they interact that is not typical at all of the way that workers are presented, right? They're also kind of brooding. So I understand why this film could have been I don't know, a target because the workers, they ain't working for the most time.
There's a smidgen of labor. There's a
There
soupçon
is,
of
of
labor.
course.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much in what you're saying that I want to pick up on, so I'm going to have to delineate it in my head a bit. Otherwise, I'll just start rambling. I mean, one thing is the production history, which we can maybe get into in a bit, which is super interesting, and like Muratova's coming out of filmmaking exile for this film. But
Mhm.
just on what you're saying about like the use of this very proletarian setting and like the weird relationship this film seems to have to that kind of stereotypical like sanctioned socialist realist narrative. It's like you can see the skeleton of that socialist realist kind of master plot. It's set in a kind of site of labor, and it's about a woman making the ideologically correct choice of the kind of considerate, conscientious worker over the more self-involved and annoying guy, which is spoilers what eventually happens. So you can kind of see the skeleton of this quite boring script that was kind of given to Muratova to work with. But then you can immediately see how she Muratovized it precisely by, like you're saying, by really exploding this question of like communication. This is the most Muratova thing, I think. Like for her, there's never a she's incapable of having a normal conversation. There is no single normal conversation or dialogue in a Muratova film, and like this, I think, is the first example of something that, like in her post-Soviet films, would become more and more kind of experimental, I guess. But here, it's like instead of just back and forth dialogue, you have songs, whistling, shouts, arguments, speeches. You have people kind of proclaiming theatrical monologues. Yeah, you have anything apart from a standard kind of back and forth shot reverse shot conversation, and that's her way, I think, of like blowing up that socialist realist plot that she'd been given to work with.
Yeah. And at first, it does feel a little bit disorienting, especially when a monologue does not align or is disentangled from its images, basically, where we're having sound from a scene that we're not seeing superimposed on what we're actually seeing,
Mm,
which is definitely an experimental approach, but in a way, I think this approach to communication or breakdown centering Luba in the at the front and center of this film makes it a great study of subjective point of view,
mm,
even if the film gives us enough context, I think, and enough time with Misha and with Kolya as well, and with the other secondary and tertiary characters too. I still feel like at the front and center is Luba and her choice as it evolves. And also I love that she's doing the thing where she's trying to choose, but is actually stalling for time and having fun with it and testing the grounds. In a way, it's quite playful.
mm.
But yeah, this I want to single out the repetition of basically what is it? Is it the opening lines of the film almost? Is one of the first things that we hear
Oh,
is Luba's
this
voice.
speech that she has
Yeah,
prepared.
the speech for of marriage, praising love. Um, that is extremely beautiful, I think, and the fact that it's repeated three times at different points in the film the second time could be read as an ironic snipe. The third time, though, feels even more genuine than the first time we hear it. And it makes me think about Muratova's approach to I guess, communication breakdown and repetitions in a way that actually draws you in further into the characters without any sort of psychological cues in a way, yeah, I kind of felt this repetition as a gesture of generosity and invitation to look at the character anew each
Mm,
time she says it. Of course, it's extremely cheesy what she says. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm a sucker for those kinds of things, and um, I naturally read it as an invitation.
Yeah, it's well the repetition thing is very Muratova, and she does it also with visuals. She'll like run different takes of the same kind of sequence in quick succession at points. But like the thing of repetition of dialogue of words is a really Muratova thing, and like it changes the way that that speech lands changes depending on the context, right? So first we hear it in voiceover. It's this kind of strange omniscient voice. Perhaps we presume it's setting us up for the film as a whole.
Mm.
We hear it delivered at this strange kind of mass wedding of Komsomol youth that they turn up at the beginning of the film, at which point it seems kind of silly and almost satirical. There's kind of hundreds of brides and grooms just kind of running around their tractors, and she's
Together, group wedding.
proclaiming the speech, and then we hear it again in this scene that's like the kind of scene of the most heightened flirtation between her and Misha, where they're kind of repeating it back and forth to one another in the cab of his truck. And at that point, suddenly it becomes very intimate and very personal. So yeah, it changes with the context. And like you say, that's a kind of invitation and a kind of opening up of meaning. I think there's a quote from Murata. I'm going to forget the interview, but I always really like this as an explanation. Someone said to her once in an interview, it's like you don't care about dialogue, you don't care about communication. And she said, well, no, what it is it's like opera. Because in opera,
Hmm.
it's a very anti-psychological form, like you said there. Like it's not a psychological realism. It's people kind of proclaiming back and forth with this kind of chorus setting things up, but like nonetheless, it produces a sense of characterization, despite the fact that like psychological access is blocked, if you like. I don't know that I always like that analogy from her.
Yeah. No, no, of course. I completely agree. And that quote is actually very valuable to read these moments of repetition too, and also to read the visual repetitions. And I love how disorienting they can be, where the shot reverse shot is basically revealing the same characters in a different part of a take that we haven't seen before. This idea of a reflection, of seeing yourself in the next shot, but also the characters are not seeing themselves. It's the viewer and the camera who's being tricked by the editing. So this artificial reflection, this artificial mirror is of course a beautiful tribute to the ontology of cinema, right?
Mm,
What is cinema? What is the camera? What is the lens? The proximity to another world, the world of cinema that is so close and resembles ours so much, but yet we cannot touch it. It's unattainable, and maybe that could be also a way to read the film's ending, where a mirror breaks, is broken. A mirror is forcibly broken. The reflections of newlyweds are shattered. I feel like it's much more of an optimistic gesture in a
mm.
way. Let's keep the world, the cinematic world intact and not try to break in it, break through the mirror in a way. Yeah, I'm quite particular about mirrors in that way. I feel
Well, it's a
like
mirror heavy. It's a mirror heavy film. That's a hard thing to say.
it's true, and I'm very curious to see more of these reflections throughout Muratova's work and how they, I don't know, they frame things in a different way because the symbolism is quite out there, but I feel like it's deceivingly simple, the symbolism. So I wanted to ask you, what do you make of these reflections in these mirrors, and
Well,
what function do you think they serve?
well, like you say, like they're part of this arithmetic of the triangle and the ways in which the three main characters bounce off of each other and kind of mutually reinforce or undermine each other's relationships in a way that two people can't can't do. And it's a very Muratova kind of visual motif. The mirror, it's part of her play with repetition, and I think you're right that it's like part of her self-reflexive kind of meta-cinematic understanding. The kind of final shots of the film that you mentioned there, Lyuba and Misha have just kind of agreed to get married, and they're sat in front of a mirror. And then Kolya is walking off disgruntled into the distance, and he throws a rock. And I think it's the penultimate shot of the film is the reflection of Lyuba and Misha in the mirror getting shattered by the rock striking the mirror. And it's almost like, well, the film has to end there because the mirror has finally been broken. This act of reflection has been broken. It's interesting, like there's a kind of openness to it, like we're no longer stuck in this world of reflections and images. Maybe we can now get on with our lives, but it's also a shutting down in the way that it kind of destroys the image that we've become accustomed to, if that makes sense. It's a very ambiguous, some might say dialectical ending.
Yeah, I I would say so as well. But it left me feeling kind of happy. And in a way, the film managed to, in my viewing, to use the trope of the love triangle and a woman between two men in a way that didn't make me root for one or the other, which
Really.
is very rare. I love rooting for for
But
couples.
one of them is so annoying. Collier is
I
so kind of
know.
unpleasant and annoying. You're a very generous viewer.
Yeah, it's true that he is annoying, but as I don't know, I think as the runtime and the plot evolves, and especially seeing him by himself or seeing him with Misha, there was a certain vulnerability, and of course, not the kind of vulnerability of a man that is ready to look deep into himself and perhaps self-reflect and become self-aware. But I grew fond of him too, even if he was overplaying the jealousy bit quite a lot, I think. Maybe this gestures towards my reading of all love triangles. Like, can you just not be a triple? Like, you all get along.
I think that might have been
It
a
could have
bit
been.
much for the censors
Oh yeah, of course.
in
It would be a bit too
1978.
much today, even today as well. People don't make films like these even now, but part of me is always very attentive to how the two rivals also interact.
The
Um,
homosocial aspect of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just by Kolya being in the close proximity of Misha and also being threatened by him, etc., that also represented a change in his character as well. So, in a way, it's not the kind of triangle that is properly hierarchical, as
Mm.
in both men are striving to achieve the goal of attaining the woman, and then nobody changes. In the meantime, she just needs to make a choice or decide what she already knew she wanted. I feel like there's a point of transformation. So there's a point where the each part of this triangle can be at the top, and then it shifts, and then it
Yeah.
shifts, and then it shifts. And I think that's really difficult to attain in the script and also to perform it in some way, especially without these psychological cues of proper character arcs and character development. So I'm really amazed by the levity this film brings with itself.
Yeah, and I think that's to do with the setting because this is like this construction site is it's very it's very unfinished like by definition, but the fact that this world that they inhabit is kind of unfinished, rooms and buildings just stop without walls or roofs, and there's all these kind of open pits and churned up mud and people living in kind of temporary like caravans and trailers. I think it's part of that. That's what that kind of helps to give the film and these relationships this kind of open-endedness and this ability to resist hierarchy and to kind of go through these transformations. I've got this quote from Muratova, hang on a sec, about the building site, which I think kind of is quite helpful. She
Mm.
says, a building site is chaos, a sphere where culture has not yet been created, where there's no concept of beautiful or not beautiful. There's no aesthetic because it remains to be created. Chaos may seem terrible, but to me it's wonderful because there are as yet no postulates at all. There's no style, so stylization is impossible.
Mm.
I don't know. I think this that open-endedness in Muratova is there in the foundation plot.
Yeah. Yeah, because in a way it's prehistorical, pre-order, pre-culture, but it's not necessarily co-opted into that freedom, everything's up for grabs kind of thing. It's more of a site for exploration. And yeah, it's not at the very beginning of a construction being constructed. It's kind of like in the middle of this process, which is also quite interesting to me because as you said, there are parts of houses, parts of rooms, but there are no walls. It would be very different if it was just putting the concrete base on a building, and that's
Yeah.
what they were doing, right?
And at the end, like it does end with them just about to move into this newly constructed building. So it kind of ends with the image of completion or finalization, but still slightly kind of deferred somehow. We never actually see them
Yeah, because as you said,
enter the building.
and thank God in a way, because the more interesting part of the story was what we've already seen just
Mm,
now. And as you said, that's where the magic happens. That's where we can see things unfold. The before and after seems way more easily regimented, and I can understand why it's not as interesting for for a filmmaker, for a storyteller. And yeah, I'm just surprised how much she managed to achieve with relatively little tension. Like she's not a very expressive or expressionistic filmmaker, more of the impressionistic kind, I think, and that's that's beautifully coupled with the aesthetic, even though, you know, it's a time before stylization, as she says in the quote, but the film is stylized
yeah.
in a wonderful way, I think. What do you think about the colors?
Well, this is her first film in color, and she had the real good luck of working with a cinematographer called Yuri Klimenko, who was working at Lenfilm, who's an amazing cinematographer. Worked with Parajanov, worked with Alexei German, he as well. He shot Hard to Be a God, like in
Insane to me.
yeah.
Absolutely insane to me.
And I think Muratova, I think she's misquoted on this. A lot of people say that Muratova said that this was her favorite of her own films. I think what she said was it's her favorite of her color films. So,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, the palette of it's not quite golden hour, but everything seems to happen in this slight dusk, slight crepuscular light that really kind of highlights the yellowy browns and greys of a kind of muddy construction site in a way that's very almost sentimental. It's like it's not quite
Mm.
sepia, but it everything is kind of tinged with this glow of maybe like expectation or potential in a way that she says that it exists before the concept of beauty or not beauty. But I don't know. I think she is finding beauty. Her and Klimenko are finding beauty in the surroundings. That's how I read it.
Yeah, because it would be very easy to make a film that is just desaturated or more sepia toned or, you know, to convey a certain nostalgic feeling or unfinishedness through the lack of saturation. But they don't do that. And as you said, there is a glow captured there. The work with light, with
Mm.
yeah, it brings out so much unexpectedly for me as well. It's probably gonna be as well my favorite of her color films once I see them all.
Well, she made a lot of great films. One thing I was thinking as you were talking there was about this idea of the unfinishedness and the point before stylization kind of begins. And like this film is so important and interesting in Muratova's filmography, and this is maybe where the kind of production history comes in a little bit. She'd made these two films in Odessa, Brief Encounters and Long Farewell, and they'd both been banned, and she'd basically been blacklisted at that point, and she hadn't been allowed to make a film for it would have been 7 years. And then after this film, she wasn't really allowed to work on a film again until the end of perestroika, and she made the Arsenic Syndrome right at the end of the Soviet period. And this film kind of stands out as this island in a sea of blacklisting and
Hmm.
inactivity. And it's because she lived in Odessa and she was kind of blacklisted in Odessa, but she was invited, like you said, by Lenfilm in Leningrad to go and make a film there at that studio. And Lenfilm had this reputation as like the home of what is sometimes kind of anachronistically called Soviet art house, like more serious adult, maybe even more kind of experimental dramas than were made, I don't know, in Moscow or the other republics or the other studios. So she was kind of given this lifeline. She was invited by enterprising studio staff to come to Leningrad to make this film, and it allowed her this kind of brief moment of like creative possibility, creative freedom. And the film that she made feels so perfectly poised between that kind of provincial melodrama of those first films like Brief Encounters and the more out there films that she would end up making from the end of the Soviet period onwards. It's such a perfect kind of like crystallization of these various of her tendencies or her proclivities.
I did read somewhere in an essay, the author was suggesting, an essay on the film, obviously, the author was suggesting that the ending with the breaking of the mirror is ambiguous because it may symbolize his rejection of that triangle and his voluntary exit or maybe condemnation. But
Mm,
at the same time, breaking something on your wedding day is considered good luck, which is very
interesting.
true. Breaking something usually is considered good luck in our cultures. No, people usually clap actually when this happens.
Yeah.
Still, so I guess the mirror is always a symbol that is loaded with a lot of meanings. It's a code for vanity. It has sinful connotations, but at the same time, it's almost a quasi magical portal to another world. I'm thinking of Alice in Wonderland. I'm thinking of even Narcissus, looking at his own reflection in the water and getting too close to it and wanting to become one with his reflection, which then costs him his life, right? So there's always this cautionary tale embedded in what the mirror symbolizes. So that's, I guess, why I'm more inclined to read the ending in a positive, even playful note that, in a way, it's a rejection of that desire to become one with your own reflection because it is an act of vanity and also it's a lie, right? And also seeing your own reflection makes you self-conscious and it affects the way that you behave, much like a camera does.
Mm,
Because even though you don't have access to what the camera is perceiving, you are perceived as an object.
right.
And I guess this is where I see the similarities between the ontology of the cinematic image and the camera and the mirrors and this voluntary exit, actually. So maybe there exists an interpretation of the ending where Kolya is actually saving them, in a way, part of a blessing, perhaps taking this danger away from them. Maybe it is far-fetched, but I think still defensible. I don't know.
Would you say like it's a breaking an illusion in that sense? Is it a kind of like rejection of illusion somehow in
Yeah,
that moment of
yeah.
breaking?
Like an act of liberation, and the
Mm,
fact that it's coming from the third person in the triangle who has been sidelined and exits it could be also seen as an act of care, as in like you don't need this reflection, you can just be together without the self-consciousness of being perceived. You can just be.
right.
Um,
I think on that idea of Muratova kind of folding the idea or the ontology of cinema into the film itself, there is one thing that I really wanted to mention, which is remember that scene where it's nighttime and a woman breaks down and Misha helps her to jumpstart her car.
Hmm.
That woman, that's a cameo from Lyudmila Gurchenko, who was one of the kind of icons of like Soviet musicals, like kind of Stalinist era, like 50s musicals. She was a kind of yeah, she was like a pin-up. She was a huge figure. And she's almost kind of playing herself in that moment. The
Hmm.
character is never named. She's not on screen for very long. But like that's such a meta cinematic nod from Muratova, and it comes out of nowhere. Literally, this character turns up, her car breaks down. 30 seconds later, she's gone. I don't know. There's something in that kind of gesture from Muratova that's so cheeky and kind of open ended in a way that I think is really it's fun. You know, she's not considered often a very fun director, but I think it's a
Mm.
there's a lot of fun in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that scene was done so beautifully and so smart in a way that the woman, the unnamed woman who needs help, is coming in to kind of diffuse the tension between the two of them as they're having a romantic moment in the car. And then this other woman comes in, asks for Misha to come out, and he obliges without asking anything, and then you're starting to think, oh, is this another love story? Where is this going to go? But in the end, her role is to bring them closer together, to get him out of the car, get her out of the car as well, have them discover each other in the dark as well, and drop a letter that would then be a further bonding device for them. So it's a really fun way to use a character for as a plot driving mechanism, but at the same time, who you cast, how you portray them. She barely says anything, to be fair, but the camera is on her face throughout, and it feels like a treat to be seeing her in this weird artificial light, but yet she's radiating. So it does feel like a tribute to her
Yeah,
by
she's like
Muratova.
because the whole scene is it's at night and the whole scene is lit by the headlights of the truck, so she's in spotlight, like
Yes.
which highlights the theatricality, which is such a part of the whole film. I think this sets me up quite nicely for my last question, actually, which is Muratova is, and I think largely on the basis of her later films, like her post-Soviet films, she's held up as the kind of patron saint of unsentimentality. Like people talk about her films in terms of cacophony, irrationalism, the zoological instinct. That's a kind of critical angle a lot of people take with her. And what people like about her is her kind of fierce rejection of psychology, naturalism, and sentiment. And that's certainly true of her later films. And yet, this film, and like what we've been talking about it, it's a love story that ends up being quite simple and sincere, with lots of moments of real tenderness and like seemingly
Mm.
quite kind of earnest moments of kind of romanticism. So I guess like my last question for you is like, does Muratova believe in love? No, that's a ridiculous question. Is this film romantic? Should we take it sincerely, earnestly on its face in what it says
Yes,
about love?
yes. Always, always. I mean, you would never hear any skepticism from me on this kind of topic or this kind of question about any film, but I guess I was also surprised by how sincerely I felt about this film and how on board I was with it, and this seeping melancholy about the only happiness that you can attain is shared, but then it's really hard. Nobody can love anybody. These kind of contradicting statements that are at the core of what I think is something very human, which is yearning. And I guess it's something that is not associated with Kira Muratova as a director, but I felt it strongly in Brief Encounters. I felt it strongly here. And I guess it's a luxury to be able to portray that in a film and be taken seriously, quote unquote. Even still now, there are these taboos, these limits imposed on sentimentality. Melodrama is still considered almost a pejorative. And, back then even more so, especially making a film, as you said, at Lend Film with the big dogs and the serious art house stuff, and making a film like this that is melodramatic and fun, and also I guess there is a deeply political message about togetherness and figuring out the constellations that we can work against, and also finding your true love on the construction site. It's great stuff. And then yeah, attend the Consumo group wedding. So it's quite impressive that she manages to take all these bits together and not make it seem surface level or schlocky or satirical. And I really appreciate that, because whatever direction her sentimentality is channeled in, I think there should be traces of that. But I guess under different guise in her later work, I'm still yet to discover, but I will be looking out for that, and I doubt I will see it completely disappear. At least I hope. Yeah, I'm very anti-cynicism on these matters of the heart.
Well, you may find your instincts tested a little bit as you delve deeper into late era Muratova, but I'm very jealous of you getting to experience those films for the first time. And yeah, with that nod to your future film viewing, I think we'll probably leave it there for today. Savina, thanks so much for joining us on the Kino Club, and thank you for picking one of my favourite films, giving me the opportunity to talk about it today. Savina Petkova, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.